Thanks for joining us on Fox 10 Newsmaker Sunday. Pleased to have with us today a guy who we have not spent a lot of time with on this program. In fact, I believe this is the first time that Andy Biggs has been on this program. The newly minted congressman from District 5, the East Valley. Good to see you. We're talking Mesa, Chandler, Queen Creek, your hometown of Gilbert, much of the East Valley, replacing Matt Salmon, who retired. Good to see you, and thanks for coming in.
Good to see you. Thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
You've been in now, what, 3 months, 4 months almost?
Yeah, a little over 3 months.
How has that transition been, going from where you were in the Arizona Senate? You were Senate President, the House before that, the Arizona State House. How did that prepare you for this job, and what's been the biggest surprise so far in Washington?
Well, I think it prepared me in the way that Congress works, because it's a lawmaking body, it's a self-governing body. Everything is done through the committee process, so I know how committees work.
It's familiar to you.
Absolutely. It's the familiarity. We get bills, we read legislation, you know how to read the legislation. And so all of those things are very familiar and have made for a mostly easy adjustment. But the other aspect of it, too, is any legislative body, you're going to see people act and respond in certain ways that are very familiar and similar as well. People are going to put pressure on you in certain ways. You know how to respond to that
You're talking
pressure.
about lobbyists, constituents, all of it.
Lobbyists, constituents, leadership.
Leadership, right.
Other members of your conference. You've seen that before. You know how to respond. I feel much less
overwhelmed?
Yeah, that's a good way of saying it. Much less overwhelmed. I feel much more comfortable than I think I would have thought going into it.
Is it functional? You know, people have talked about the dysfunction in Washington. Do you think that Congress is still functioning, even though it may be messy, the way it should?
I do believe that. People forget that the purpose of Congress is to have filters, so you don't just spit out a bunch of bad ideas. You want to filter out bad ideas. And when we say it's functioning, what you're seeing is, I think the healthcare thing was the perfect example of how it functions, because when you get there and you say, well, this is going to have a problem, and people both from the moderate side, people from the conservative side kind of ended up, even though they were at odds over why, they said, wait a second, we've got to put a brake on this.
And you are part of the Freedom Caucus. That's about 60 members who are extremely conservative. Would you agree with that?
I don't know if we have, I don't know what, no one knows what the official number is, but we're conservative.
And if you were to describe to somebody, you're sitting to somebody flying home from Washington next to somebody on an airplane, and they said, so you're a congressman, tell me about this Freedom Caucus. What's the deal? What are they about?
Well, I think the Freedom Caucus is a great place for people like myself who say, look, we want to be effective. And in Congress, you have to have groups in order, I mean, this is really the truth. You have to have some groups together to have lever.
Strength in number.
Exactly, because everything is done by committees and coalitions and caucuses. And so this is a caucus that gets together. We actually debate the merits of bills. We read the bills. We debate the merits of the bills. We talk about solutions. We try to find out how can we make this bill better. Or,
so in the case of health care,
yeah.
What was it that you said, I cannot buy into this? Was it just the fact that it would not bring costs down?
Yeah, let me just say this. The Freedom Caucus never took a formal position on that. Everybody was basically an agent to themselves, but we discussed the very thing you talked about. Will this bring costs down? We actually brought in experts to Freedom Caucus from both sides of the fence to say, tell us what this would do. And they gave us that information. For me, I don't understand this in some ways after saying that a lot of this is familiar, but what we're talking about is a president who said we need to repeal Obamacare. We're talking about Mitch McConnell who said we need to repeal Obamacare and tear it out root and branch. And the Republicans, before I got there, put out a pamphlet saying you can't untie the knot on this. You must repeal everything about Obamacare. Well, the bill didn't do any of that.
The bill saved a lot of it.
It saved a lot of it. It kept the framework in place.
So it didn't go nearly far enough.
Yeah, for me, I want to be able to go back. So I admit that I'm asking for the perfect, which is a straight repeal. Oddly enough, a bill that has been passed in Congress a number of times before at least out of the House of Representatives. That's what I said was the perfect. Then they say, don't let that be the enemy of the good. Fine. The next best thing would be the 2015 bill that passed out unanimously by Republicans in the House and the Senate.
And it appears that you may be inching toward that goal right now, right? Healthcare is not dead. Reforming or repealing Obamacare and trying to fix it, if that's what it may end up being, you're still moving in that direction quietly. Is that correct?
That's correct. And so what you're seeing happen is there are negotiations. While we've been off on this work recess, there are negotiations that are happening daily.
Is the administration involved in this?
I'm not sure where they are involved in it, but I do know that you're getting groups within the conference. I know leadership is kind of acting as a facilitator in some ways, where groups are coming together. They're talking about, can we get there here?
Do you believe you can get there? Do you believe that this will still happen?
Oh, I feel very strongly it's going to happen. Whether it gets to the point where I can vote for it, I don't know, because the devil's in the details. I mean, we need to see what's written. We need to know exactly what's happening with it.
Let me ask you, you just came home this week. You had a town hall. Was it the first town hall you'd had since you...
First in-person town hall. We had done two teletown halls.
A lot of folks in your situation had kind of avoided the in-person town hall because they were becoming unruly and out of hand and really uncivilized. And then you guys got chastised for not meeting with constituents face-to-face. You got hectored a bit at your town hall, mainly over climate change. That was the biggest thing of the night when you said, you know, I'm not sure about this stuff. I have doubts. You got a big groan. That tells me that the makeup in the audience is probably liberal. Is it liberals coming to the town hall hassling you, or is it conservatives to the right of you, which would be almost impossible because you're pretty far right?
Yeah. Well, John, let me tell you, in this particular event, I give kudos to my staff, Mesa PD, the church that let us hold it there. It was a big venue.
Right.
It seats 950, but only 600 or so came, and of those 600, I would guesstimate roughly 2/3 were against me and 1/3 were for me.
Against meaning Democrats? Democrat leaning?
Yeah, I don't know what. Yeah, they certainly weren't
organized.
Yes, and yeah, I would say it sure seemed organized to me, and we've seen some of the social media that went out afterwards, and they said, well, we need to organize our chants better. So when we call him coward, we need to all be shouting coward together. We need to.
Oh, you've seen this?
We've seen it.
Okay.
Yeah, we've absolutely seen it, and so.
I mean, it's their right, by the way, because you
Absolutely.
represent Democrats and Republicans. Even though you're a Republican, you represent that whole district. They have a right to say what they want.
Absolutely. My goal was to be gracious and welcoming and smiling. Embrace it, lean into it.
How did that work, taking that approach?
I felt pretty good. You know, of all the questions, I mean, people say, well, we didn't get that time to ask all our questions. Well, the reality is, there was only one person that I knew was from my supporters who were there who asked a question. She got booed while she was asking the question. But I was smiling and welcoming, and I thanked everyone. And I'm sincere when I say this. I'm glad that we could do this. But actually, at one point, somebody stands up and yells, "Quit smiling!" And I'm like, oh, really? We're glad to have you here.
Let me ask you about a couple of things in the news. Obviously, let's take tape number one. The missile strike Donald Trump orders in Syria to take out the airfield, a couple hours north and east of the capital of Syria. When you saw this, what was your reaction?
I had a lot of mixed feelings, the way I think most Americans did. I think we were all horrified by the use of chemical weapons by Assad. But by the same token, we don't want to insert ourselves so far that we get drawn into this conflict, which is a civil war.
Are you worried about that?
I am worried about that, absolutely. I was reminded of the early 80s when President Reagan undertook similar action unilaterally with regards to Libya.
Right.
And so my thought was, okay, I get it. We finally have a strong president who's doing this, who's taking this very strong action, setting a marker. The context also comes into play. You had Assad and the Russians who had previously said, we've eliminated all use of chemical weapons.
Right. And then you have Trump meeting with the Chinese president at the same time this is going on.
Yes.
Is that by design, or is that just a happy accident, but it seemed to send a message?
I agree with you. It sent a real message, because it wasn't long after that the 150,000 troops moving to the North Korean border and China's border moved back and stood down. I think that it was probably a happy coincidence, serendipity in some ways, but Congress has the power to declare war. The President is the Commander-in-Chief under the Constitution. There's a War Powers Act which is meant to bridge that, but the constitutionality of that can be brought into question.
So do you believe he should have gone to you guys and said, here's what I'm planning to do, I need you to sign off on it? Because that does hamstring a president.
Oh, absolutely, it hamstrings a president, but it's meant to do that because we're the people's representatives, and it was to prevent us from getting into kind of a military junta type of thing.
Right.
So I wish that he would have come to Congress. I understand why he didn't come to Congress. But I do think if any further action in that arena needs to come to Congress.
Okay, so let's take tape 2. Yeah. Now you got a bomb landing today, as we're taping this on Thursday, on the Afghan border, right near the Tora Bora region where Osama bin Laden was hanging out after 9/11.
Right.
To try to break apart these tunnels, this super bomb, Moab, the mother of all bombs. Right. Do you think the president should have come to you about this?
This is a little bit different context in the sense that we've already been engaged in military conduct or in various places in the world against ISIS. The issue that so on this specific action, I'm not sure that I would say he needed to come to Congress. But what I would say is, if we're going to make acts of war against even ISIS, even though it's a non-state actor, non-traditional adversary, I think we need to basically make the case to the American public that we need to be at war with them. And we need to go to Congress and make that same case. And if we do, what has to happen at that point is we pool our resources, we pool our resolve and our commitment to make this a priority like no other.
It's interesting because, Congressman, when I hear you speak, this is the argument Democrats have been making. The president needs to come to us about this stuff. He can't just kind of go off on his own and do this stuff.
Well, Democrats weren't making that under the previous administration.
Yeah?
What I'm suggesting is, look, we have military forces throughout the world, and I don't believe in the America as world policeman strategy. I do believe in America as protect our security interests.
Which is exactly what President Trump, Donald Trump, candidate Trump, was talking about on the campaign trail.
Absolutely.
Now he's taken a step into these incursions that maybe, I think a lot of people, even people who voted for him, maybe did not anticipate.
I would agree with that. I mean, we look back and see, what did he say you know, 4 or 5 years ago when President Obama was considering what to do? He said, don't do it. Don't do it. And President Trump promised, I'm going to be the president of the United States of America.
Right, America first.
America first. And so I think the distinction with what I heard his explanation in Syria is he was trying to make a case that this was a critical national security interest that we were protecting. And it was a measured response by attacking infrastructure. Now, if that's the case, then that's very limited. He still, under the War Powers Act, has got to come back to Congress and explain that and justify that.
The president making this decision without congressional approval, I mean, if you do that, you really telegraph to the enemy what you're about to do.
Well, that is correct, and that's what War Powers Act was designed to allow. But the question you have to ask yourself is, was that action justified unilaterally on the part of the executive branch?
And you say?
That's where I've vacillated. So because I look at it and I say, I think that in this instance I can justify it. I can justify it because of all the context that you and I have just talked about. But by the same token, you really can't do much more than that. And how do you do much more than that? Is you come back to Congress, you come to the American people and say, here's why we have to do this.
We're going to take a break, quick break on Newsmaker Sunday. When we come back, we're going to talk about the border wall, the chances of that actually happening, Trump tax reform, where does that stand going forward, and this idea of sanctuary cities. We're going to talk about that and more with Andy Biggs, new congressman from District 5 in the East Valley of the greater Phoenix area. Back with Congressman Biggs in a moment on Newsmaker Sunday. Back with Congressman Andy Biggs. He won election, first term, to Arizona's 5th Congressional District, replacing Matt Salmon, who retired. Boy, that was a nail-biter of an election. You won by 27 votes?
27 votes.
Over
yes.
Christine Jones.
Yes, in the primary.
Did you think that you had lost that race at any point? Did you think you had lost it? Or did your people on the ground say, not so fast, I think you're going to win it when it's all counted?
Well, I will just tell you, the night of the party, the night of the election, we had a party. My wife and I were the only two that we felt like we were going to win. And in any event, we'd done all that we could.
Even though you were trailing that night?
Yeah, we were trailing that night.
On election night. We thought Christine Jones' lead would probably hold up. Well, I'll just be very honest about it. We thought it would.
Well, our polling data, our pollster was very clear to us. He said, look, everything tells us that she will win the early ballots. But you are trending in the day of. And we think if you work hard and we get the kind of turnout that we think we're going to get, which by the way was far more than we anticipated, which I think it made a huge difference because we were probably 8,000 people below where the turnout actually was.
Right, and my feeling that night, and usually this has been the case, the early vote, when it comes in, that separation, it may close or widen a little bit, but generally who's on top when the early ballots are counted usually ends up prevailing.
Well, what we did is
this was really kind of different.
Yeah, it was different but what we did is we got that message about a week into early ballotings. And we said, we're changing our message. And so we went out and changed our message. And what we felt we needed to do is we needed to not even talk about our opponent, no contrast, nothing. We're just going to talk about me. So people would know who I was, because that was the deal. The people who knew who I was, positives were very high. But we felt like we didn't have enough people that knew who I was, so we needed to get out so people knew who I was.
Do you believe Christine Jones has a future somewhere?
Yeah, I think so.
In politics.
I think so.
She's 0 for 2 running for office right now.
Yeah.
But a lot of people feel she's got a lot of game. Where would be a good fit for her?
Well, I've always felt that if she's going to run for Congress, she should run in the district in which she lives, which I think she would be a formidable opponent there. Mm-hmm. I think that she's, quite frankly, you mentioned I'm a pretty conservative guy. CD5 is a pretty conservative district. I think that her political philosophy probably fits much better in CD9 than it does in CD5. Let
me roll tape number 5. There's been all this talk about the border wall. One of your colleagues in the Arizona Congressional Delegation has said that he wants environmental impact studies on effects on species with this wall. I'm talking about Raul Grijalva, of course. There seem to be a lot of roadblocks already kind of going up with this. Do you believe this will ever come to fruition, and will it look like anything Donald Trump described during the campaign?
Well, I don't know how beautiful it will be.
My sense is it'll end up like this, something you can see through, right? Because even border agents want to be able to see what's on the other side. They don't want some wall that they can't see through.
Well, so the wall that's up behind us right now is very similar to the wall outside of Nogales, where it's these tall, slatted...
It's fortified.
Yeah, but what's interesting about it is, when I've been down to the border and I've talked to people who are monitoring the border, they will say, I say, how long does it take to get through that? He says, oh, you can get over and down. I think it's 5 or 6 seconds of that wall. I think that you're going to see a wall. I think you're going to also see increased technological barriers. I think you're going to see the need for roadways and easements along that border fence. And I do
so that it could be patrolled more readily.
Absolutely.
Right.
It absolutely.
Some of the topography makes it impossible.
Well, it's impossible to build a wall, just like it's impossible to actually cross through there.
Right.
So yeah, will it go from McAllen to San Diego?
Right. I mean, you can't, and you've got the reservation there. That's also a problem. They're not going to put a wall up on the reservation.
Well, so I've met with the Tohono O'odham reservation leadership a couple times now. They don't want it. I don't ever want to mislead anybody in the public. They do not want a wall. But I have suggested that you'll never get a better time to leverage what you want that wall to look like than now.
Well, and furthermore, they may not want a physical wall, but they do not like what's happening to their native lands with the drug smugglers and the people coming through.
Right, they don't. And
it's brought mayhem.
And they also don't like the technological towers and stuff that are out there monitoring. But I think they need to have, they have border entry stations already on their reservation. And I think those need to be modernized and updated and more efficient for them, as well as roadways and easements for them.
Let me roll tape number 6. I'm bouncing around a little bit, but Donald Trump has said, and even your speaker, Paul Ryan, has said, we're going to move on to tax reform. Even though health care is quietly still kind of noise in the background, you're still working on it. This is Reince Priebus talking about where we are with tax reform. Take a listen.
Moving forward, the president's vision on lowering taxes for every American is what's going to unite not just the Republican Party, but I think some of those Democrats are going to come on board as well. If we can provide one of the biggest middle-class tax cuts in the history of this country.
Congressman, some people have said if you can't get health care done, tax reform is going to be even tougher.
I disagree with that. There's a part of me that wishes we would have done tax reform first. It is it's an easier sell to certainly the entire Republican conference, because what we're talking about impacts individuals, including the middle class, reducing their taxes, providing opportunities for them, also reducing the highest corporate tax rate in the world to stimulate the economy. These are things that we basically universally within the Republican conference believe in.
And if you believe in Arthur Laffer and all these other people, this is what will reap benefits almost immediately if you do this.
Yeah, and I think that the Laffer curve doesn't work on every tax, but when we start talking income tax and corporate income tax in particular, it does work, and it happens typically within a year to 2 years. And you would see that, and we anticipate, and I think the economists that I've talked to and heard give briefings on this, it could raise the GDP by a point or so in fairly short order. That's $1 trillion more into the economy.
We're going to take a quick break here on Newsmaker Sunday. Congressman Andy Biggs from CD5 in the East Valley, replacing Matt Salmon, won a tight election in the primary, won easily in the general. We're back with Congressman Biggs right after this. Final moments with Congressman Andy Biggs. We've been inundated by this video all week long. This guy on a United Airlines jet pulled off the flight. This was ugly. Is this something Congress now needs to get involved in to protect the passengers, which, by the way, and I remind people on social media, we bailed out as taxpayers these very airlines. United was a big benefactor. And this is how they thank us?
Look, I'm not sure that Congress needs to get involved because they're already heavily regulated. These contracts are there. What happened here that was highly unusual is the physical confrontation.
Right.
Which, you know, so much could have been avoided if the airline personnel would have just handled this, I think, quite differently.
Do you think you guys might weigh into this to try to protect people, give consumers, try to protect the consumer a little bit?
I don't think that that's the right rule for Congress, because I can tell you this, already airlines are supposed to provide that compensation if they're going to bump you. And
if they just give the right price, somebody will take it.
Somebody will take it.
I mean, that's a free market, and it would be far less expensive than losing, what was it, 1.5 billion in one trading day for United.
Oh, absolutely. This, to me, this is just kind of highly unfortunate situation, because this guy's dragged off.
Yeah.
And all it would have taken was probably some. Maybe you need some better training to, you know.
Thank you, Congressman
Thank you.
Biggs. We appreciate it. We got to have you back.
Thank you.
And thank you for weighing in on that, because everybody's talking about it. We'll see you next week on Newsmaker Sunday. Thank you again.
Thanks, Jim.